starting from Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph,
Right.
and we're going to start approximately to the second line from the top.
Yeah, Imina.
Okay, Zok the Heilige Gemara. Umina Amar Abelazar bar Yosy, bar Rabbi Yosy. Abba Hoya Noitel Eser Groigroi Shebe Miktsaya. He would take 10 Groigrois as Meiser or as Trumas Meiser Al Tishim Shebe Kalkala. Now the problem here is B'minyan, it's exactly 10%.
Right.
But in Kamos, its volume was much less than 10%. So it's shortchanging to Trumas Meiser. So if you're going to say you go back to its status in its original form where it was also a Teina Shapir, then it's beautiful because it's 10% B'minyan and it's 10% in Kamos.
Yeah.
Elai Amrit Kamoy Shehain, like it is right now, Botzalahu, because 10 Gregors are much smaller than, or 1 Gregors is much smaller than 1 Taina.
Right.
Zokti Gemara Ki Asher Avdimi Omer Belazar, shiny Gregors, Hoil V'Yachal Sherlkon Ulachsirin L'Chamoy Shehain. Gregors, we don't even look like it's smaller. It's actually even considered the same Kamos, because once you soak it in water, it'll grow back to its original size. I saw brought down Lalacha in this papers that they give out on the daf that it's very nageya. What if you have milk powder that falls into meat? It's not enough to be mevatel the milk powder. You have to be mevatel shishim keneged how much milk you could have made with the milk powder. The same with the concentrate. So it's enough kamina halacha lemaisa.
Right.
Tan rabbanan tormin te'enim al hagroigros. You're allowed to use te'enim as truma for groigros, but not everywhere. Only b'makoim sheregilim lasois te'enim groigros. Only in a place where it's easy to make the te'enim into groigros. Either the kohen could do it by himself, or he can easily find a vendor to do it for him. Because if not, it's going to spoil. Groigros remains once it's dried out, but te'enim could spoil. Veloy groigros al te'enim, but you're never allowed to use groigros as truma on te'enim. Va'afilu b'makom sheregilan lasas te'enim, even b'makom where it was ruggle to make te'enim into groigros. So the Gemara needs to analyze this brisa because it seems like it's a stira minei ubei. Amar mar tormin te'enim ala groigros b'makom sheregilan lasos te'enim groigros. So we can be medayik. The makom sheregilin is the only time you're allowed to be torim tainim on groigros. But the makom shein regilin loy fekdamar hechadami. What exactly is the case? Id ikakoyin makom shein ragel amai loy. If there is a coin there, so I don't have to worry about it getting spoiled because I can give it to the coin right now, and he can eat fresh gishmake tainim. So amai loy vatnan makom sheish coin torim inayofe. And Rashi tells us that if you compare groigros to te'enim, avada te'enim is yofa. It's kishmak, it's fresh, versus a dried out fig. Nervos, it has a chesaron, the yofa, that it won't last. But if there's a coin here, let me give it to him, and he'll eat it right now. So he'll have full no. So that's best case scenario. If you have a coin available to give it to right now, avada give him te'enim. So therefore, the question is, why do you say makom she'ein rugel to make te'enim into groigros?
You can't.
You can't use it as truma. Why not? If there's a coin there, give it to him. It'll be perfect. Elapshita, the brisa must be talking about a case. The leka coin. There's no coin around, and therefore you should not give him te'enim over groigros because you need to give him something that'll last. Zok the Gemara ema seifa. What about the seifa of this very same brisa? V'loy groigros al te'enim. You're never allowed to use groigros as trumas meiser for te'enim. Correct, the Gemara v'ida like a coin. If we're saying this brisa is speaking where there was no coin to give it to, right? And that's why you have to use. That's why you can give them. That's why we said earlier that you wouldn't be able to give te'enim for groigros if it wasn't a place where you make groigros. So if it's being like a coin, Amai loy. Why can't you give the coin? Why can't you use for Trumas Meiser Groigers? For carrot, it's better because if
Okay.
there's no coin around and you use Tainim, it's going to go bad.
Yeah. So
If there's no coin, so you're going to have a problem with the fresh Tainim going bad.
right.
Better use as Trumas Meiser something that will last, which would be the Groigers. So why does it say in the Brisa? Avada, you should use groigos because there's no coin around. Elopshita must be the safer speaking in the case. The Ika coin, if there's a coin there, you shouldn't give him Tainim for Gregor. You shouldn't give him Gregors for Tainim. Give him Tainim for Tainim because that's a Dovar
Better.
Yofa.
It's better. Yeah.
That's right. So Akta Gemara, so we're going to be forced to say ratio the leka coin. The ratio speaking, there's no coin, and that's why we were medayik that you should not give Tainim for Gregors if it's not a place where they make it, right? That was the dick, right?
Yeah.
But Mokim she'ein regil loy, right? So there you have to speak the leka coin, and the seifa where you have to give the Tainim to the coin, you have to say speaking the Ika coin. But that's a shverlich to say that the bride that changes cases in middle without even telling us.
Right.
Look, we're in, but that's what we have to do. Ratio the leka coin, seifa the Ika coin. Omar Papa said the Gemara had a different alternative. The Gemara could have answered this kasha differently. And the Gemara could have answered that it's not a libiduchula alma. It's not a libiduchula alma that you give a davar hamiskayim before you give a davar yafa. Maybe you can hold, the Tanu holds, you always give a davar yafa. So that would be pshat. That would be pshat in the Brisa. Why couldn't we say that the ratio is going on according to the Tanu who holds that you give a davar miskayim, and the sefer could be going according to the hold you don't give a davar miskayim.
So that's also switching tracks.
Sorry?
That's also switching tracks.
Oh, that's true. So Amar Papa Shmami no dachkinon umakminon maslisim b'reiter taimi v'loy mikminon b'reiter tanoi. If you have two options, either way is not lechatchila. But you have two options. Should you touch the Brisa or the Mishnah in two cases, aliba the one tana or according to two separate tanoim? It's always best to keep it aliba the one tana.
Right.
Zok the heilige Mishnah weiter, and we learned this Mishnah yesterday. Kol Menachos niloishois bepoishrin. You needed with a K. You needed the dough of the mincha in tepid water, not cold water. And then umishamron, you have to do a positive act of mishamron by working the dough to make sure shalo yachmitzu. Now, that's talking about the kamitza before you take the kamitza, right? Now the Mishnah is changing. Vim hichmitz shiareh. I'm taking the vav out based on the gears of the shita. Vim hichmitz shiareh. If you purposely make the shirayim chametz, over beloy says you're over naloy says. Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, kol amincha shetzkrivu Hashem loy seyasa chametz. Now this is a big problem because kol amincha shetakrivu Hashem. Clearly, we're talking about the kaimates or the mincha before the kaimates, and not the shirayim. So the Gemara is going to want to know how does the Mishnah know halacha that even the shirayim you're not allowed to have chametz.
Why did you say purposely be machmitzed?
Because how could you be over a license if you didn't do it on purpose?
You weren't careful. You didn't do it. You didn't take the shmirat to.
So okay, I hear. It says if it happened to become chametz, that's how you're learning. But if you look at the base, he changed it to tzarich v'im hichmitz ashira over. So that's mashma that dafke if you were machmitz on purpose.
For purpose, yeah.
Shenemar kol mincha asher takrivu l'Hashem lo yisayas chametz, and that's shver because that's not talking about the shirayim. And now the Mishnah is a third halacha. V'chayiv al ishasa v'al arichasa v'al afiyasa. It's not pshat. There's one lav. If you make lisha b'chametz for the mincha yechayiv, aricha is like setting up the loaf, shaping the loaf, and afiyasa is baking it. So there's multiple lavin that you're over if you work on the chametz dike. You work on the chametz dike mincha. Fact the Gemara Minah Hanamili, and Rashi Hanamabay says Minah Hanamili that the shirayim if you're machmetz them you're over below. Says Amar Shlokish Amar Kra Another pasuk says loy say ofa chametz. So after in Parshas Vayikra it says loy say osa chametz, and in Parshas Tzav the pasuk says loy say ofa chametz chelkom. So let's look at the pasuk how we read it pasuk pshat and how the Gemara is darshaning it. It says loy say ofa chametz, comma chelkom nasati oisa. I gave the kohanim their chelik. The Gemara is saying take the comma away and darshan loy say ofa chametz chelkom. Lo Sayafa Chametz Chelkom Zok the Gemara Afilu Chelkom, even their share means even the Shirayim Lo Sayafa Chametz. Frek the Gemara, is that what we learn out of the pasuk of Lo Sayafa Chametz Chelkom? V'hai Lahach Yudasa Hai Mi Boila Lechetanya. We need the Lo Sayafa Chametz to teach us a different halacha. It says in the pasuk Lo Sayafa Lo Sayafa Chametz. Ma Talmud Loimer. Why does it say that this halacha the Torah already taught us? No part of the mincha could be made chametz. So afia is part of the mincha, part of the process. Zogt the brisa. I'll tell you why. Why the pasuk got to speak out lo say afa. L'vishanemer lo say asa chametz. Yochel lo yechayiv ela achas al kulam. You might have thought that there's only one lav. If you make it chametz, there's one lav. So even if you made lisha and aricha and afia, it's all one lav. The Torah speaks out and itemizes one lav. It's similar to havora lechalak yotzes or lelav yotzes, right? So lo seyafa afia bechlal hoisa. Afia we already knew from lo seyasa. So lama yotzes. Why did the Torah speak out lo seyafa? It's lahakish elah ma afia miyuchede she ma'isi yechidi. It's a ma'isi yechidi. Rashi says a ma'isa choshev b'fnei atzmai v'chayov in aleh b'fnei atzma. And if you just do afia, you'll be chayiv malchus for it. Af ani avi lishasa v'arichasa v'chol ma'isa yechidi shaba le'asuye kitov, which is brushing the bread with water. I guess it gives it a nice glaze.
Yeah.
Shehu ma'isa yechidi, even though Rashi is not as a ma'isa choshev as afia, but it's also something v'chayov in Allah b'fnei atzmai. So that's what Lo Seyafa Chametz tells you, that there's multiple lavin. How could you use it to tell me that the lav also applies to the shirayim? Zok the Gemara, because anan mechelkam kamrinon. Maskim from Lo Seyafa Chametz you learn there's multiple lavin, but the next word chelkam, that's where we learn that it even applies to the shirayim. Frek the Gemara. Let's say that maybe the whole pasuk is only to tell you about the shirayim, and maybe you can't learn what the brisa taught us, that each ma'isa is an independent alav. No, because in Cain it should have said chelkom loy seyafa chametz, because that would be the most normal way to express it. The chelik of the kohanim shouldn't be baked chametz, if that's the only thing the Torah wanted to tell us. But the Torah says loy seyafa chametz chelkom. That's a shtickle out of order. Therefore, shmas minotarti. We all know that Hungarian says, "I called the plumber to put me in the toilet." Right? Everyone makes fun of Hungarians. Yeah. Really, in English, say, "I called the plumber to install the toilet for me." Right? Not to put me in the toilet. Right?
Yeah, maybe
that's what this is. Lo shev chametz chelkom. Don't bake chametz. The chaylik. Right? So, an Hungarian would read this Gemara, he wouldn't understand what's the problem.
Kids try to play in the toilet, so.
Okay, gewaltig. Shmas mina tarti. So the Torah expresses it in this unusual way. We learn two halachas: A, there's multiple lavin; B, even the shirayim may not be prepared chametz. Frek the Gemara, the ema afia the parat barachmana lechayiv chada. And in lechayiv chada kulu, maybe only afia. It says maybe dafka afia lelav yotus. Maybe only the afia is unique, that it has its own lav. But maybe all the rest of them are all one big asiya, and they're not individual lavin. Rather, they're if you do them all together, you're over one lav. Shkoich for fine challah. I know that. So Dr. Gemara, what? Mishum da have a davar shahayu bechlal the yotzim nachlal. Now we have the blue tracks again because we say karbanos every day, and we say this in the brayso of Rebbe Shmuel. Davadover shahoya bechlal v'yotzim nachlal. Afia was in the chlal of lo seyasa. Yet the Torah specifies lo seyafa. Not only to say that afia is a lav b'fnei atzmai, elalamed ala klal kula yotza every different avoida in the asiya, which means the lisha, the arichasa, the afia, of course, as well as the kitov, will all be a lav for zechalein. Correct Gemara. After you look at it differently, ve'emer loy say ase klal. Loy say afe, which is later in Parashat Tzav, is prat. So loy say also the klal is in Vayikra. Loy say afe, the prat is later in Tzav. We know there's a rule, klal prat, ein bechlal ela mashe beprat. Afia in, maybe there's only a law for afia, midi achrini loy. Amr Abaptoriki, mishum dava klal prat hamiruchokim zeh. Whenever the klal and prat are far from each other,
right?
We're in the klal far from each other. We don't darshan b'chlal prat. B'chlal prat amru chakim zemizeh ain't done in noisei b'chlal prat. Frek Toisvis Rava says even if it's muruchakin, you're done the klal prat. Yishlemish Toisvis the hasam dafke done in lefishu b'chada parshosa. Yes, you could don a klal prat even though the prat is far away from the klal, but that's when it's within the same parsha. Avalocha the chad b'vayikra the chad b'tzaves aharon ava betrayin yonim. Umoida and even Rav is moida the ain't done in gewaltig. Most of about the bravo, but Amri Lakadi Uchlal Uprat Hamuruchakim Zemize ain't done in nice on the Chalal Prat. Is that taka the rule that every time the prat is far away from the cloud, you're not going to darshan it b'chlal prat? I'm going to quote you a brisa, and we're going to be medayik from the brisa that you actually could darshan a klal prat even though they're far away. Bizvatanya. It says in the pasuk, when it's talking about the Asir Nasi, we know when a Nasi does an Aveir, he doesn't bring a regular carbon chatas. Rather, he brings a Seir, a male animal. So the Torah, when it's discussing that parsha of the Asir Nasi, the Torah says, V'shochat oisoi bimkoim asher yishchat esa oila l'fnei Hashem chatasu. So I'll look at the Torah. It says, V'somach yodoi al roish ha'soyer, V'shochat oisoi bimkoim asher yishchat esa oila l'fnei Hashem chatasu. This is the Seir of a Nasi. Heichon oila nishchetes. It says b'mkoim asher yishchetes oila. Where do we shech the oila? B'tzafayin. Avse b'tzafayin. So how do we know that the seir nasi the chatos you shech b'tzafayin? You know it because the Torah says shech it where you shech the oila. Frag the Gemara. Do we need the Torah over here by the nasi to tell me that? V'chi anu mikan l'meiden. But like for Nemar, we have a different pasuk that says. When it talks about the Torah's chatos, even before it talks about the specific chatos of a nasi, when it talks about the general carbon chatos, so why in the world would you think this doesn't apply to the Sir Nasi? Why don't you need a special pasuk for the Sir Nasi? I have already a pasuk that all chatos you shech b'tzafayin. Halam is a yatsa. So why did the Torah have to repeat again by the Nasi that you shechted b'tzafon? It must be l'koivai to make it b'di'evid. We know by kochim, unless it's mentioned twice, it's not possible b'di'evid. I would have thought that only lechatchila is it also to shecht a chatus b'tzafon. But if you shechted it, maybe it would be kosher. Kamash v'lon, the repeat of the halacha v'shachad doisa b'mkoim by the Shir Nasi simloi shachad doisa b'tzafon posloi. Frek the brayse weiter. At oimer lekach yotzis. Oh, so you're telling me that's the reason why the Torah repeated by the Sir Nasi that it has to be shechted b'tzofen? That's to tell you that it's b'di'evet? Oy einoi ella. Maybe to tell you a different halacha. Shezeh ton tzofen, ve'nacher ton tzofen. Maybe fakert. Maybe what the Torah is telling me is, yes, it says by a general chatos, it's b'tzofen. And now that the Torah says by the Sir of the Nasi, v'shachad oisai, the Torah is saying, yes, a chatos has to be shechted b'tzofen. But which chatos? Not all chatos, only the chatos of a nasi.
So why did you tell me about chatos then?
I'm sorry?
So why does the Torah have to tell you about chatos then?
I don't know.
Just tell me only.
Talmud Loimar, v'shachat es a chatos b'mkoim ha'oila. So he has a shaila who it is. It says v'samach yodi al rosh chatos v'shachat es a chatos b'mkoim ha'oila, which is by a chatos yochid. Or he says Rashi goes from v'samach yodi al rosh chatos v'shachat oisal chatos b'mkoim ha'yishtach ha'oila. So it says elsewhere, Zeh bono av l'chol chatois shetunois tzafin. You can't possibly say that only the Sir Nasi requires Shechita B'Tzofain because we have a binyan av. So that is the brisa. Now the Gemara is analyzing the brisa. Time of the cause of Rachmana v'Shochet is achatos. The only reason why we know that every chatos needs tzafon is only because of the binyan av. If it wasn't for the binyan av, I would have said that the Baal Torah specifies by the Sir Nasi tzafon. From there we learn that only the Sir Nasi needs tzafon and no other chatos needs tzafon. Havamina shezeh ton tzafon v'dein achar ton tzafon. So the question, why would I think that? Why would I think that? Rav Baruch right away challenged it. Why would I think that? The Gemara goes weiter. My time, lav mishum, it must be to have a klal of prat. So this will answer Rav Baruch's kasha, because you asked him hechatesa. It says v'shachat. The teretz is because it's a klal of prat. It taka says by al chatois you shecht it b'tzofein, but then it says a prat, not al chatois, only the seir of a nosi. The afagav, and that's the only reason. Otherwise, you could ask, why in the world do we need the binyan av? Why would I think that the Torah is limiting tzofein to the Sir Nasi? It must be because of the klal prat. The afagav the meruchaken zemizeh. Don't know the prat, and that's why we needed the binyan av.
Right.
So you have a right that you do dash in the klal prat hamuruchaken. So Dr. Bashi, absolutely not. That sugya there by the Sir Chatos has nothing to do with the klal prat. You know why it has nothing to do with the klal prat? Because it's not a klal prat. It's because the prat comes first. If you look at the chronology of the psukim, the prat came first. Let's have a look. Which is the prat, is Vayikra Dalit, right? Where does it say the klal? It says Vayikra Vav. So that's not a klal prat. That's a prat klal. So Zok Gemara Freik Rabashi, Hi klal pratu. No, pratu klalu. V'nasa klal moisav ala prat. V'zraba kol mili. So we're back to square one. Why do I need a binyan av? To tell me that all chatois yushech b'tzafein. I have a pratu klal. It's partial to the shech b'tzafein. Why do I need a binyan av? Ella, it must be tana oisoi kokashalei. The Tana is focusing on this word. It says v'samach yodei al reish asar v'shachat oisoi. Oisoi means dafka the Sir Nasi, not something else. There's a miut. So the reason why there was a havamina, again the answer to Baruch's question. The reason why there'd be a havamina that only by the Sir Nasi do you shechted b'tzafon is because of the oisoi. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a raya about anything to do with a klal prat hamuruchakim. Zemizeh. It's a whole different issue of achikamar. Oy einoi ella shezeh ton tzafon deinacher ton tzafon the cause of Rachman oisoi, and therefore the brisa brought the binyan av. Period. Zog to Gemara, v'hashtu the nafkalei mi v'shochet esachatos. So at the end of the day, from the binyan av, we know that all chatois are b'tzafon, and don't look at the limud of oisoi where it says by nasi, because the binyan av tells us not to listen. So then, what do I need oisoi for? Oisoi lemute mai. Zok Gemara lemute oisoi b'tzafon dafka the seer of achatos has to be b'tzafon. The ain't seer nachshain b'tzafon. Seer nachshain, Rashi says, is referring to the seirim of all of the Nisim by Chanukah Sabayis. They all brought a chatos, and that chatos that they brought didn't have to be b'tzafon. My shno high chatos, my high chatos. So Rashi v'hanu memayid the ain't tunin tzafon to loibo achet kishar chatos. This was like, so that when you get married, you tell your wife 100 times, I'm sorry, and then she has 100 I'm sorry's in the bank, so whenever you do something wrong, she can apply one of your I'm sorry's. So, but it's not a chatas for a specific aveir. So it's like, so look, you could say that it doesn't have the same halacha as sofan.
I'm sure you didn't use up all your
what?
I'm sure you didn't empty your bank account yet.
So kedai techamina hoil vis rabbi leinin smicha. I would have thought that a Sir Nachshain needs Tofin. Why would I have thought that it needs Tofin? Because it has other similarity to the Karban Chatos, and that is that the Sir Nachshain did require Smicha. Kamash V'lan, that although it needs Smicha, it doesn't need Tofin. Fragt Gemara, how do you know that the Sir Nachshain needs Smicha? Smicha Gufa Min Alan. Tanya, it says, V'samach Yodoi, Al Roisha Sa'ir, L'Rabbis Seir Nachshain L'Smicha. So we learned it from Viter, the Sir Nasi, V'samach yod al Rosh HaSeir is also talking about Sir Nachshon, but the Shachad also, but not Tzofan. So that's what the Gemara says. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's very beautiful. Vibalt, we have a pasuk to be marbet sinachshon l'smicha. I would have thought that Shechita is required, but Tzofan kamashma not. The problem is Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Omer, turning on to Amar Aleph, l'rabois sharei seirei avodas kachavim l'smicha. It's coming to be marbet a completely different thing. The seir avodas kachavim is when Klal Yisrael is chayte. We know if they are chayte on achiv kares, they bring a pile on Bavshal Tzibor. But if it's avodas zara that they were chayte with, due to an error in a psak bezdin, they bring a seir avodas kachavim, and that's what you learn. Even the seir avodas kachavim. So, frag the Gemara, bazoi matzke v'lo ravina. Tenech Rabbi Yehuda. I understand why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need a pasuk to say that the seir nasi doesn't, the seir nachshon doesn't need tzofon because the seir nachshon needs smicha. But according to Rabbi Shimon, the seir nachshon doesn't need smicha. He doesn't learn it. So, Michael Member, what is the purpose of the oisoi by the seir of a nasi according to Rabbi Shimon? Amalem azutra bereider of mori l'ravina. You think it's good according to Rabbi Yehuda? According to Rabbi Yehuda, this is fair. Rabbi Yehuda nami, because my day is Rabbi, my day lo is Rabbi. Why would you say just because we learn from the seir nasi that the seir nachshon needs smicha, so that means automatically it should need tzofan? Forget it. We have a special limud to tell you that the seir nachshon needs smicha. We don't have a special limud to say that it needs tzofan. Why do I need a limud to tell me pum fakert? If I don't have a makar, I don't have a makar. Why do I need a pasuk fakert? So even according to Rabbi Yehuda, where we do learn from the samach es yodoy al roish hasoyer to be marbes here nachshon and l'smicha, we still have no makar whatsoever for tzofan. So we're back to the start. What is oisei for? If you're going to argue, if the Torah was not memayit the seir nachshon from requiring tzofan, havamina teisi b'vinyanav, I would have learned it from a binyanav. The binyanav, comparing it to all the other chatois. That main binyanav, we would have thought would have included the seir nachshon b'tzofan. So we need oisei to be b'mayit. But if you hold that you could learn the seir nachshon from a binyanav, then why do I need a limit for shmicha? Shmicha gufa lishto kramine v'teisi b'binyanav. If you're going to say that the binyanav includes the seir nachshon, and I need also to exclude it from tzofon, so then why do I need a limit to include it in shmicha? Ella, what are you going to be forced to say? That you cannot include seir nachshon in the binyanav. Why not? Because Ella shah midayros lo yafinon. The binyanav is talking about a chatos that's nagela dayros. The korbanos were a one-time thing. You can't bring a raya from all other rules and other korbanos to the seir nachshon. Hachanami oy bazoy lagabi the tzofan as well. Shomi daris loyafinon. So back to the drawing board. Why do I need oisoi? What's the miyut that the Torah tells us by the seir of a nasi? Ella oisoi ton tzofan veina shoichet oy made b'tzofan. Forget about learning about other korbanos. The oisoi is the animal. B'shachad oisoi. The animal has to be b'tzofan, but the shoichet could be b'darim, and he can use a knife and lean over. The shoichet himself doesn't have to be b'tzofan. We're shortly going to learn that by the Kabbalah Saddam, the Makabal Dam has to be b'tzofan, but not by the shoichet. We have this in Zavachim. Frag the Gemara, why would I need oisoi by the seir nasi to tell us that a shoichet doesn't have to be b'tzofan? Midir Rav Achia nafka. We know it from Rav Achia. He already taught us the Tanya. Rav Achia Omer. Is it Achia or Achia? Is it Rav Achia or Rav Achia?
I don't know. Good guess.
I have Achaya. Okay. The Tanya Rav Achia Omer. V'shachad oisoi al yerach hamizbeach tzafayna. This is by the Oila right in the beginning of Vayikra. Ma tamad loimer v'avosh deit tzafayna levishomatzinu b'mekabel. We know the Mekabel Adam has to be physically himself standing b'tzofon. But if the Kohen was standing b'darim, but he leaned over and he was Mekabel Adam b'tzofon, but he wasn't the darim, pasal, it would be pasal. Yochel avsakein. I would have thought by Shechita it's the same halacha that if the Shechit is standing b'darim. He passes the carbon. Talmud loymar by the seer nosi oisai dafke b'tzafain oisai b'tzafain v'loya shechit tzarach liyos aimid b'tzafain. So the problem is, how could you tell me we learned that from oisai by the seer nosi? You learn it from v'shachad oisai by the carbon oila. So weiter, why do I need oisai by the seer nosi? Ella by the seer nosi oisai b'tzafain ve'ein b'noif b'tzafain. When you make malika on an oif, you don't have to do that b'tzafain. Why would I have thought that you need to make malika b'tzafain? So kedai techamina leisi v'kavachomer ben tzoin. You learn a kavachomer from tzoin. Uma ben tzoin shaloi kavaloi koyin. By a ben tzoin shechita we know is ksher bazar. Nevertheless, kavaloi tzafain ben oif shekavaloi koyin. It has to be bedafka done through a koyin. It's more chamor. Ein oidin shenikvaloi tzafain. Zok to Gemara, that's not a raya. I'll slug the kavachomer up. Mal ben tzoin shekin kavaloi kli. Shechita has a chomra. You need a keli. For malika, you don't need a keli. So weiter, why do I need oisai to be memayit? A bird that doesn't need tzafine. So what am I going to do with oisai? Ella will try another one. Ella oisai b'tzafine, vein pesach b'tzafine. It's to teach us that we don't shech the carbon pesach b'tzafine. So now we can say the Leblin strikes again. We're already shloshim yom kaidem machag, and we're talking about pesach. Frank the Gemara. What? Oh, yeah, that's right. Pesach, I don't need Oisai to tell you that you shecht Pesach b'dorim. I know it from Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Why? The Tanya Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Yochel yeh Pesach ton sofain. You would have thought that the Pesach needs sofain, and there's a good Tanya to say it needs sofain. V'dinu, uma oila shaloi kavalos man b'shchitasa. An oila you can bring any time. Nevertheless, Kavala Tzavain, Pesach Shekavala is Manach Shechita, Dafka Erev Pesach in the afternoon. Einoidin Shekavala Tzavain. But that's not a good raya, because Malo Oilo Shekein Kalil. That's why I need Tzavain. So it's more Mechatos. Chatos is not Kalil. But Malachatos Shekein Mechaperes Al Chayve Krisos. So it's more Meosham. Malo Oshim Shekein Kocha Kochim. Once you have Kocha Kochim, which Pesach is Kochim Kalim, so then Mikulinami, even if you want to use Chatos and Oshim and Oil together, I would say Ma'ala Tzara Shavush Behen, Shei Kocha Kochim. So why in the world would I think that a Pesach needs to be Shechli B'Tzofain? I wouldn't think that at all. So Oibazoi, we're stuck now. It says V'shachat Oisai by Yasir Nasi, and we don't know what the Pasuk is teaching. Let's go back to our first pshat. Oisai b'tzafain ve'ena shoichet b'tzafain. You had a kasha, the kasha loch made Rab Achya nafka because he learned it from the v'shachat oisai by the oila. No, Rab Achya lav lemutei shoichet b'tzafain hudasa. Rab Achya also relies on the v'shachat oisai by the sirnasi to tell you that the shoichet could be b'darim. He dash from again v'shachat oisai by the oila. That's to tell you oisa dafke by the shechita. Can the shoichet stand bedorim? But by the Kabbalah, the shoichet cannot stand bedorim. And that's how we know that the mekabel hadam has to be betzofin. So lav lemuta shoichet betzofin udasa. Elachi kamar eina shoichet betzofin avol mekabel betzofin. But the mekabel has to be betzofin. So, and how do you know that? You know it from the shachad oisai by oila. Frank the Gemara, if you learn Tzvachim, you'll learn that we know that the Mikabel has to be B'tzafain from a different pasuk. Mikabel mi lokach vilokach. This is vil lokach hakoyin, and we dash in loikach. He has to take himself. Nafka, Zakt Gemara, maybe Rabachia holds you can't learn it from there. Lokach v'lokach loy mashmalei. Frekt Rashi abom b'dikakasha. Who said the limud from V'shachad oisoi of Rab Achia, the second V'shachad oisoi, is to tell you that this should not apply, to a makabel. Adarabba, maybe the echne v'shachad by shechita, by the oila, tells you im inyan legufa l'shechita tenayu inyan lekabbalah, and we should learn that the makabel also doesn't have to be standing b'tzafna. So unfortunately, the lights just went off in this room, so I have to turn on my phone light. And this way I'll be able to see the shtickle from the from the sheet over here. So he says very gishmak. He says, where am I? I'm looking over here. Where's the Rashi over here? The Rashi is, here's the Rashi. V'ikasha effect Rashi. L'Rab Achia, ema oisa b'tzofain, v'loy mekabel b'tzofain. Oh, maybe forget you learned that the mekabel b'chlal has nothing to do with tzofan. So he has, where does he taken to? He taken to Vov. So the Vov over here, Teritz. Teritz is a teretz. Mistavra de miuta. Mistavra de miuta ashoichet de samach leikoi. Pashis, if we're being memayit, we're going to use the miyit for shchita. The chsiv is shachad oisai. Umideloi memayit ela oisai michlal de mekabel b'tzofain. We're only memayit that the shoichet doesn't have to be b'tzofain. So from there you can figure out that the makabel has to be b'tzofain. Rather than saying the pasuk is referring to the makabel and to tell you that the makabel doesn't need tzafon, it's better to say that it applies to the shoichet, that the shoichet needs tzafon, and the shoichet does not need tzafon. After the behemoth is b'tzafon, but not the shoichet himself. But the makabel is different, and he would have to be b'tzafon. Okay, so we'll stop here. We're Amud ahead. The Beis Hashem will be mamshech tomorrow. I was hoping to stay here and prepare, but that's not going to happen because we just lost the light. So then we have a gittavach. If the Olam has a minute, I'm going to tell you a gewaltige word from Dudi Samuels. Gewaltige word. It says in this week's parsha, "V'loy sachmoit ish es artzecha." When you go to be oila regel, you don't have to worry that you're abandoning your cities, and there'll be another nation, was glusich dein land, and they'll come and ransack and take over. And we learn es artzecha. Es is even marbe. They won't come and steal things. You're right. Your animals are left. No one's watching anything. Everyone to be oila regel. You don't have to worry. No one's going to touch any of your stuff. It says in the pasuk, when Rivka didn't know what's going on in her stomach, it says, "Vatelech lidroish es Hashem." She wanted to know what's going on up here. So now I want to go back a little bit to the kolola that was given to Chava. It says that she's going to give birth with difficulty. So if you look up Rashi there, Rashi says first of a bitzitel libodim. Rashi first says tsar gidel bodim, and then the tsar of the heroine of the pregnancy. So everybody asks on Rashi, I don't understand. What comes first, the gidel bonim or the pregnancy? Avad the pregnancy comes first. Why didn't Rashi say first the tsar heroine and then the tsar gidel bonim? So the answer is that a woman is mechuyev Loshevis Yitzara, she's mechuyev to bring children into the world, but she only has a chiv to bring one child into the world. So Mamela, the Itzvitel Dibonim, it's not going on the first pregnancy, because the first pregnancy, she has a mitzvah to do it. And there's a concept of ha'oisik b'mitzvah, the concept of shlucha mitzvah, and in the zoikin, loy balichasim, loy b'chazirasim, which we actually learn from this week's parsha, where it says, you're a shliach mitzvah, you're going to be on the regel, the Rebbeinu Shem is not going to let you suffer for it. So that takes care of the Orion. But that doesn't take care of the gidel bonim, and it doesn't take care of the second pregnancy. So Rashi is talking about the second pregnancy, that's where that she's going to have tsar. So what would happen with Rivka? Rivka didn't know that she had two children. She thought she only had one child. So Vatidra is Vatelech Lidra Esh Hashem. She was going to darshan. Are you darshan Essen? Rabbi Kiva darshan Essen. Rabbi Shimon ben Menachos was choish from all his Essen because of Es Hashem Lekachatira. He couldn't darshan. So she went to Shem Ve'ever to find out darshan min Yodi Es and Ishtes. In other words, do we say Shluch Mitzvah in Zoikin? They told her, "Oh, this is not Shnei Goyim B'Vitneich. For the first one, Taka is not going to have Tzar. The Tzar kommt for the Zweite." Gewaltig.
Schreich.
Schkoich. Ich wünsche euch eine gute Woche, ein Gebench dabei.
Jetzt warte so.